Day 0 to 8 o'clock hours. Regional Emergency Communications Center. Shift log K. Mercer, Communications Coordinator. Coffee's brewing in the break room, same burnt smell as always. Third pot this morning. Night shift went through the first 2 dealing with that multi-vehicle accident on I-94. Standard Tuesday, nothing unusual in the overnight reports. Power grid stable, all emergency frequencies clear, backup systems showing green across the board. The morning briefing feels routine in that comfortable way that makes you forget how quickly things can change. Dispatcher Chen hands off the radio logs with her usual efficiency, dark circles under her eyes suggesting the night was busier than the reports indicate. Traffic accidents, coupled domestic disturbances, one medical emergency that turned out to be food poisoning, she summarizes, already reaching for her jacket. Johnson's got the weather service calling for afternoon thunderstorms, but nothing severe. I settle into the coordinator's chair, adjusting the headset that's molded itself to my skull after 8 years of emergency management. The console spreads before me like a pilot's cockpit. Radio frequencies, computer terminals, direct lines to police, fire, medical services, and the State Emergency Management Office. Every light shows green. Every system reports normal. The kind of morning that makes you grateful for boring. Morning Kale. Dispatcher Rodriguez slides into the adjacent station, already pulling up the incident management system. Quiet night. You should be able to catch up on those FEMA compliance reports. The paperwork never ends. Federal requirements, state mandates, county protocols, all designed to ensure we're ready when the big one hits. Hurricane evacuation procedures, flood response coordination, mass casualty incident management. We drill for everything, prepare for disasters that might never come, maintain systems that justify their existence by working so well you forget they're there. My terminal displays the regional status board. 17 police departments, 12 fire districts, 6 hospitals, 3 emergency medical services, 2 National Weather Service offices, and the State Emergency Operations Center. All connected through redundant communication networks, all reporting normal operations. The electromagnetic spectrum belongs to us, carved up and allocated with military precision. The coffee tastes better than it has any right to, given the age of the machine. I'm reviewing overnight incident reports when the phone rings, landline, not the emergency frequency. Regional Emergency Communications, Cale Mercer. Cale, it's Orion Hale down at the power station. His voice carries that engineer's precision I've come to appreciate over the years. We're seeing some unusual electromagnetic readings this morning. Nothing critical, but I wanted to run it past you before filing the official report. Orion doesn't call unless something genuinely puzzles him. 23 years maintaining the regional power grid has given him an intuitive sense for electrical anomalies that I've learned to trust. What kind of readings? Small fluctuations in the magnetic field sensors, consistent pattern moving northeast to southwest across the region. Started around 0400, peaked about 0630, now declining. Could be solar activity, but the National Weather Service hasn't issued any geomagnetic storm warnings. I pull up the space weather monitoring site on my secondary screen. Solar wind speed normal, no coronal mass ejections reported, geomagnetic field showing typical diurnal variation. Maybe equipment calibration drift? When did you last run diagnostics on the sensors? Last Friday. All systems checked out perfectly. There's a pause, the sound of papers shuffling. Look, it's probably nothing. Just wanted you to know in case other agencies report anything unusual. Sometimes power grid anomalies precede communication issues. Professional paranoia, the kind that keeps emergency managers employed. I'll make a note in the log and monitor the frequencies. Thanks for the heads up. After hanging up, I create a new incident file. Power grid electromagnetic anomaly investigation. Probably nothing, but documentation is everything in emergency management. Cover your bases, maintain the paper trail, prepare for the possibility that today's minor anomaly becomes tomorrow's major incident. The radio chatter continues its familiar rhythm. Police dispatch coordinating routine patrols, fire department testing equipment, medical services positioning ambulances for optimal coverage. The city breathes through our communication networks, every emergency call flowing through systems maintained by people like Orion, managed by people like me. My phone buzzes with a text from Lisa. Don't forget Emma's soccer game tonight. 6 p.m., North Field. Normal life intruding on professional routine, the way it should be. 8-year-old daughters don't care about electromagnetic anomalies or FEMA compliance reports. They care about whether dad shows up to cheer when they score goals. I'm updating the duty roster when every screen in the communications center flickers simultaneously. Just for a second, less than a heartbeat, but every display goes dark before immediately returning to normal. The coffee in my mug ripples like something heavy just passed overhead. Rodriguez looks up from her terminal, eyebrows raised in question. Did you feel that? I check my screens systematically. All systems showing normal, no alerts triggered, no error messages logged. But the timestamp on the incident management system shows 8 hours 47 minutes and 23 seconds, while my wristwatch reads 8 hours 47 minutes and 48 seconds. 25 seconds of discrepancy that shouldn't exist in systems synchronized to atomic clocks. Power fluctuation, I say, making another note in the incident file. Probably related to whatever Orion's seeing at the grid. But power fluctuations don't affect quartz watch crystals, and they don't create that momentary sense of falling, like the earth shifted slightly beneath the building's foundation. Rodriguez shrugs and returns to her reports. Normal day, normal operations, normal explanations for abnormal events. The coffee tastes the same, the radio chatter continues unchanged, and the morning briefing reports filter through proper channels with bureaucratic efficiency. I update the incident log. 8:47 brief power fluctuation affecting all electronic systems. Duration less than 5 seconds. No system damage reported. Possible correlation with power grid electromagnetic anomaly reported by Hale, Municipal Power Authority. Monitoring for additional incidents. Outside the reinforced windows, the city continues its Tuesday morning routine. School buses navigating residential streets, commuters heading to offices, delivery trucks making their rounds. Civilization operating smoothly on the foundation of interconnected systems that most people never think about until they fail. The generator maintenance request sits in my inbox, marked for completion next Monday. Routine preventive maintenance on the backup power systems that keep us operational when the main grid fails. I approve the work order without hesitation. Proper preparation prevents poor performance, as my first supervisor used to say. Everything normal. Everything according to protocol. Everything prepared for emergencies that exist more in imagination than immediate possibility. The next call comes from St. Mary's Hospital. Emergency communications, this is Kale. Kale, it's Elvira Stone at St. Mary's Emergency Management. Her voice carries the brisk efficiency of someone accustomed to managing crises. We're having some unusual equipment calibration issues this morning. Nothing critical, but our electromagnetic monitoring devices keep requiring adjustment. Have you received any reports of unusual magnetic field activity? Second call in an hour about electromagnetic anomalies. Coincidence becomes pattern. Pattern suggests investigation. Power Authority reported similar readings. What kind of calibration issues? MRI scanners showing field variations, cardiac monitors occasionally displaying impossible readings for a few seconds before self-correcting, electronic devices requiring more frequent recalibration than normal. Our chief technician thinks it might be related to solar activity, but Weather Service hasn't issued any geomagnetic warnings. I finish. I'll add your report to the investigation file and contact the other hospitals. If it's affecting multiple facilities, we might need to issue an advisory. Thanks. Probably nothing serious, but in a hospital environment, equipment reliability isn't optional. 3 incidents. Power grid, communications center, hospital. Regional pattern emerging across critical infrastructure. Still probably nothing. Solar storms can cause electromagnetic effects without triggering official warnings, and equipment sensitivity varies widely across installations. But emergency management exists in the space between probably nothing and catastrophic something. We maintain expensive systems and complex protocols because the cost of being wrong exceeds the cost of being prepared. I pull up the contact list for regional emergency management coordinators. If electromagnetic anomalies are affecting critical infrastructure across the region, other centers should be experiencing similar issues. 5 minutes of phone calls should establish whether this is local equipment problems or something larger. The coffee has gone cold while I worked, bitter and familiar. I drain the mug and reach for the phone, already composing the questions that will either put today's anomalies to rest or transform them into tomorrow's emergency. Outside, the city continues its routine. Inside, 3 incident reports wait for correlation and analysis. Normal morning in emergency management. Professional paranoia balanced against operational efficiency. Preparation competing with productivity. The phone rings before I can make the first call. Rodriguez answers, then immediately waves me over. You need to hear this. She activates the speaker. Static fills the communications center, but underneath the white noise, a voice struggles through electromagnetic interference. All stations, this is National Weather Service Pittsburgh with urgent space weather advisory. Significant geomagnetic storm conditions developing. Recommend monitoring critical electronic systems for potential. The transmission cuts to pure static. I look at the incident file on my screen. 3 reports of electromagnetic anomalies across critical infrastructure. The timestamp still shows that impossible 25-second discrepancy. Outside, Tuesday morning continues undisturbed. Everything normal. Everything prepared. Everything about to change. Regional Emergency Communications Center. Duty log, Cale Mercer, Communications Coordinator. Day 0 to 12:47 hours. The coffee had gone cold an hour ago, but I kept sipping it anyway. Habit, I suppose. The kind of mindless routine that keeps you anchored when the displays start acting up. 3rd GPS anomaly this shift. Tower 47 Delta reporting coordinates that placed it somewhere in the Atlantic Ocean. I ran the diagnostic twice. Hardware showed green across the board, but the location data was impossible. Marked it down as a software glitch and moved on. We'd been getting more of those lately. Mercer, you seeing this static buildup on Channel 9? Rodriguez called from the adjacent workstation. She was our senior radio tech, 23 years monitoring emergency frequencies. If she was concerned, I paid attention. I switched over and heard it immediately, a low-frequency hiss that hadn't been there this morning. Not loud enough to interfere with transmissions, but present. Persistent, like electronic tinnitus. Started about an hour ago, Rodriguez continued, adjusting her headset. Ran full spectrum analysis. Nothing showing up on our interference detectors, but it's there. I logged the observation. Pattern recognition was part of my job, connecting dots that emergency responders in the field might miss. Individual incidents meant little. Clusters meant something was wrong. My phone buzzed. Text from Orion Hale at the Power Distribution Center. Weird EM readings today. Transformers reporting fluctuations, but load demand normal. You seeing anything? I stared at the message for a moment. Orion and I had worked together during the ice storm 3 years back. He didn't reach out unless something genuinely puzzled him. The man understood electrical systems like I understood communication protocols. Some anomalies here too, I typed back. GPS glitches, radio static. Related? Maybe. Readings started around 11:30. You? I checked my logs. First GPS anomaly logged at 11:34. Close enough to matter. 11:34 for us. Pattern analysis? Working on it. Lunch later? Compare notes? Roger. The phone rang before I could set it down. Emergency line. Regional Communications, Mercer speaking. Cale, it's Elvira. Elvira Stone, Emergency Coordinator at Metropolitan General. We'd collaborated on enough multi-agency responses that formal introductions were unnecessary. Quick question. Are you experiencing any communication equipment issues today? I felt that familiar tightening in my chest that came with pattern recognition. 3 separate agencies, same time frame, similar anomalies. Define issues, I said, already pulling up a new incident report. Medical equipment recalibration. Our monitors have needed adjustment twice today. Cardiac units, ventilators, even the MRI machine. Tech says electromagnetic interference, but there's no obvious source. Thought you might have insights. Radio static, GPS coordinates showing impossible locations, power grid fluctuations. I was typing as I spoke. Time frame. Started around 11:30. You. Same window. I'm logging this as a potential coordinated incident. Can you send me equipment readings? Already compiling them. Cale. Her voice carried a note I'd learned to recognize over the years. The sound of someone whose professional instincts were screaming warnings their rational mind couldn't yet process. Yeah. This feels bigger than routine technical problems. Before I could respond, every screen in the communications center flickered simultaneously. Not just mine, all of them. Rodriguez looked up from her station, eyebrows raised. The other technicians paused their work, waiting. For exactly 30 seconds, every display showed the same thing. A blue screen with white text reading, "Signal lost, attempting reconnection." Then, as suddenly as it had started, everything returned to normal. GPS coordinates correct, radio chatter clear, data streams flowing normally. "Elvira, you still there?" "I'm here. Please tell me you saw that too." 30 seconds system-wide interruption. Every screen. I was already reaching for the direct line to regional command. "I need to escalate this." "Agreed. I'll coordinate with other hospitals, see if this is regional." After she hung up, I sat staring at the incident report screen. 3 separate infrastructure systems, communications, power, medical, all experiencing anomalies in the same time frame. Individual glitches were normal. Coordinated glitches suggested external interference. The direct line to regional command rang busy. I tried again. Still busy. Emergency backup line also busy. Rodriguez appeared at my shoulder. "Kale, I'm getting reports from field units. Ambulance crews saying their GPS units are giving conflicting directions. Fire department reporting intermittent radio contact with trucks in the field. Police dispatch has 3 separate patrol units showing impossible locations." I looked at the clock, 13:15. Less than 2 hours since the first anomaly, and we were seeing systematic degradation across multiple emergency services. My phone buzzed again. "Orion, power grid showing cascade pattern. Whatever's causing interference is moving geographically. Started northeast, spreading southwest. Roughly 50 miles per hour propagation." I pulled up a regional map on my workstation and began plotting reported incidents. GPS anomalies from cellular towers. Radio interference reports. Power fluctuations. Medical equipment recalibrations. The pattern was unmistakable. A roughly circular zone of electromagnetic interference, expanding outward like ripples in a pond. Current diameter approximately 60 miles and growing. "Rodriguez, I need you to contact every emergency services agency within a 100-mile radius. Ask specifically about electronic equipment anomalies starting around 11:30 today." On it. She was already reaching for her contact directory. I tried regional command again. This time it connected, but the voice that answered sounded harried. "Regional command, Major Peterson." "Major, this is Cale Mercer at Regional Communications. We're documenting widespread electromagnetic anomalies across multiple infrastructure systems. Coordinated timing suggests external source." "How widespread?" 60-mile radius and expanding. Communications, power grid, medical equipment, emergency services GPS pattern suggests directed interference, not natural phenomena. A pause. Background voices I couldn't make out. "Mercer, I need you to compile everything you have and send it immediately. We're getting similar reports from other regions." "Other regions, sir?" "This isn't isolated to your area. Stand by for updated protocols." The line went dead. I stared at the phone, that chest-tightening sensation now a full-blown knot of anxiety. Multi-regional electromagnetic interference wasn't atmospheric, wasn't solar, wasn't accidental. Rodriguez returned with a stack of printed reports. 19 agencies responding. All confirm electronic anomalies starting between 11:25 and 11:40. GPS failures, radio static, equipment recalibration needs. 2 agencies report complete 30-second communication blackouts. I began entering data into the mapping system, each report adding another dot to the expanding circle of interference. The pattern was too perfect to be natural, too coordinated to be coincidental. My workstation chimed with an incoming priority alert. Federal Emergency Alert System activation. I'd seen these during hurricane warnings, terrorist threats, major industrial accidents. Never for electromagnetic anomalies. The message began populating on my screen. Federal Emergency Alert System. Initiated, 14:23 hours. Classification, National Security. Warning type, Space Weather Event. Massive solar flare activity detected. Electromagnetic interference expected nationwide. Essential services personnel maintain operational status. Civilian population advised to limit non-essential electronic device usage. I read it twice. Solar flare activity would explain electromagnetic interference. It would explain equipment failures. It would explain GPS anomalies. It wouldn't explain the perfect circular propagation pattern, moving at exactly 50 miles per hour. Before I could voice my skepticism to Rodriguez, every screen in the communications center went black simultaneously. Not flickering this time, complete power loss. Emergency lighting kicked in, bathing everything in red. Backup generators engaged with their familiar rumble. But the screens stayed dark. Rodriguez was already on her handheld radio, trying to reach field units. Static. She tried different frequencies. More static. Kale, she said, and I could hear the controlled panic she was fighting. We just lost primary communications with everyone. I looked at the clock on the wall, the old analog one that didn't depend on electricity. 14:47 hours. Exactly 36 seconds later, the lights went out entirely. Emergency communications log, day 0, 16 to 2000 hours. Recorded by Cale Mercer, Regional Emergency Coordinator. Location, Downtown Emergency Operations Center. The solar flare warning should have been routine. I've logged hundreds of them over the past 5 years. Space weather alerts that amount to nothing more than potential GPS drift and minor radio static. But the timing of this one, coming exactly 30 seconds after every single communication system in the building went dark simultaneously, made my stomach clench with a recognition I didn't want to acknowledge. I pulled up the anomaly reports I'd been tracking since noon, spreading the printed pages across my desk in the emergency lighting. The backup generators had kicked in automatically, but half our digital systems were showing degraded performance even on clean power. The pattern was there, clear as daylight, once I stopped looking at individual incidents and started seeing the whole picture. Electromagnetic signature propagation, northeast to southwest, consistent with high-altitude detonation approximately 200 miles northeast of our position. The timing matched. The geographic spread matched. The system failures matched everything I'd studied about electromagnetic pulse effects during my FEMA training. I reached for the hardened military radio, one of the few pieces of equipment still functioning normally. "Orion, you still monitoring this frequency?" Static crackled for 30 seconds before his voice came through, distorted but intelligible. "Cale? Jesus, I've been trying to reach you for an hour. My equipment readings are off the charts. I'm showing electromagnetic field strength that shouldn't be possible from solar activity." "What kind of readings?" "The kind you get from nuclear detonation at high altitude." "Cale, I think we've been hit." I closed my eyes, feeling the weight of professional knowledge I'd hoped never to use. EMP? Has to be. The propagation pattern, the frequency signatures, the infrastructure impact, it all matches the models. But Cale, if I'm reading this right, this wasn't natural. The electromagnetic pulse characteristics are too uniform, too precisely targeted at communication frequencies. Through the windows, the city looked almost normal in the late afternoon light. Traffic was moving, people were walking on sidewalks, life continuing. But I knew that appearance was deceiving. Electronic systems were failing in cascades too subtle for most people to notice yet. The absence of cell phone chatter in the normally busy streets. The lack of electronic hum that usually filled urban environments. The way car alarms had stopped midway 3 hours ago and never resumed. "I'm coming to you," Orion said, bringing portable detection equipment. "If this is what we think it is, we need to start documenting everything while we still can." I spent the next hour attempting to contact federal authorities through every available channel. FEMA Region 4, no response. National Communications Center, dead air. Even the hardened military frequencies were showing severe degradation. The few contacts I managed to establish were brief, fragmented, and filled with reports of similar system failures across multiple states. By 1800 hours, when Orion arrived carrying a backpack full of electronic equipment that looked like it had been assembled from spare parts, I had confirmed our worst fears. This wasn't a localized event. This wasn't natural. This was coordinated. "Show me what you've got," I said, helping him set up his detection array on the emergency center's roof. Orion's equipment was basic but functional. Analog meters, battery-powered oscilloscopes, directional antennas he'd built himself as a hobby. As an infrastructure engineer, he understood the vulnerabilities of electronic systems better than most people realized. His readings confirmed what I'd already suspected from the failure patterns. 3 separate pulse events, he said, adjusting a dial on his homemade spectrum analyzer. First one at 11:47 this morning, about 300 miles northeast. Second at 14:23, roughly 250 miles southeast. Third at 16:15, approximately 200 miles due west. Triangulated coverage pattern, I said, understanding the tactical implications. Whoever did this knew exactly how much electromagnetic coverage they needed to blanket the entire region. "Gets worse," Orion said, pointing at readings on his equipment. The pulse characteristics show enhanced gamma-ray production consistent with enhanced radiation weapons. These weren't just EMP devices. They were specifically designed to maximize electronic infrastructure damage while minimizing immediate human casualties. The tactical brilliance was terrifying. Cripple the communication systems, disable the power grid, eliminate electronic transportation, but leave the population alive. A region full of people but without the technological infrastructure to organize, coordinate, or resist. I tried reaching Elvira at the hospital using our emergency medical frequency. It took 15 minutes of repeated calls before I got through, and even then the signal was barely intelligible through layers of static. "Kale." Her voice sounded strained, exhausted. "Thank God. We've been trying to reach emergency services for hours. All our electronic medical equipment is malfunctioning. Ventilators, monitors, even the electronic medication dispensers. We're switching everything to manual operation, but..." "Elvira, listen carefully. This isn't equipment failure. We've been hit with coordinated electromagnetic pulse attacks. High-altitude nuclear detonations designed to disable electronic infrastructure." Silence on the radio for nearly a minute. When she spoke again, her voice was steady but hollow. "How long until systems come back online?" I looked at Orion, who was shaking his head slowly. "Elvira, they're not coming back online. The damage is permanent to most electronic systems. We're talking about months or years to rebuild basic infrastructure, and that's assuming we get outside help." Jesus Christ. We have patients on life support, Kale. We have medication that requires refrigeration. We have surgical procedures scheduled that require electronic monitoring. Without power, without electronics, people are going to die. How long can you maintain critical systems on backup power? Maybe 18 hours if we shut down everything non-essential. But Kale, the backup systems are showing signs of damage too. Whatever hit us, it affected even our supposedly hardened emergency equipment. Through Orion's equipment, I could hear fragments of radio chatter from emergency services across the region. Fire departments reporting equipment failures. Police departments unable to coordinate responses. Ambulance services with vehicles that wouldn't start. The cascade was beginning. "I'm going to keep trying to establish contact with federal authorities," I told Elvira. "But you need to start preparing for the possibility that we're on our own for the immediate future." How do I prepare for pre-industrial medicine, Kale? How do I tell families that their loved ones are going to die because the machines keeping them alive just became paperweights? I didn't have an answer for that. My emergency management training covered natural disasters, terrorist attacks, infrastructure failures, but not the complete collapse of technological civilization. Not the systematic elimination of every electronic system that modern life depended on. As the sun set, Orion and I continued monitoring radio frequencies, documenting the expanding scope of system failures, trying to piece together the full extent of the attack. The pattern was becoming clear. Multiple coordinated EMP strikes designed to disable electronic infrastructure across the entire southeastern United States, possibly beyond. By 1930, we had lost contact with most emergency services outside our immediate area. The few signals we could still receive were fragmentary, desperate calls for assistance that no one had the capability to provide. The isolation was becoming absolute. At 1945, I finally managed to establish brief contact with Elvira again. Her voice was barely recognizable through the static, but her words were clear enough. "All our life support systems just went down. We're switching to manual everything. If this is what I think it is." The transmission cut to permanent static. I tried for 20 minutes to re-establish contact, but the emergency medical frequency had gone completely dead. Whatever electromagnetic interference had been building throughout the day had finally overwhelmed even our most robust communication systems. I looked at Orion, who was staring at his equipment readings in the dim glow of our emergency lighting. "It's getting worse, isn't it?" He nodded slowly. "The electromagnetic effects are cascading through the powered grid. Every system failure is creating additional interference. We're not just dealing with the initial EMP damage anymore. We're dealing with a feedback loop that's going to keep degrading electronic systems until there's nothing left." Outside, the city was beginning to change. Street lights were flickering and dying in sequence. Traffic lights had gone dark. The familiar electronic hum of urban life was fading into a silence that felt ancient and wrong. I made my final log entry of the day in handwriting, using a flashlight to see the paper. 2000 hours. Electromagnetic pulse attack confirmed. Communication systems failing in cascade pattern. Federal response capability unknown. Recommend immediate transition to analog backup protocols for all essential services. This may be the last electronic record we're able to maintain. As I wrote those words, I realized I was documenting the end of the world as we knew it. Not the end of humanity, but the end of the electronic civilization that had defined modern life. Tomorrow, we would wake up in a world that had been pushed back 50 years in technological capability overnight. The only question was whether we would adapt fast enough to survive what came next. Day 0, 2000 hours to 2400 hours. Emergency communications log, entry 47. Operator ID, K. Mercer. Time, 2003, manual entry, digital clock systems non-functional. Status, critical infrastructure failure. The cascade started at 1947. First the regional power grid. Watched it happen on the big board, sector by sector going dark like dominoes falling in slow motion. Emergency backup systems kicked in automatically, but they're failing too. Whatever hit us didn't just knock out active electronics. It fried the surge protectors, the backup circuits, everything with a semiconductor in it. Orion's equipment is reading electromagnetic signatures I've never seen before. This isn't solar, he keeps saying, adjusting his analog meters with shaking hands. This is artificial. This is coordinated. The emergency radio network died at 2000 hours exactly. Not static, not interference, just silence. 23 years I've been coordinating emergency response, and I've never heard the emergency frequencies go completely quiet. It's like the electromagnetic spectrum itself went dead. Manual log entry. Time, 2047, estimated. Location, Regional Emergency Communications Center. Power's been out for an hour now. Emergency lighting lasted 30 minutes before the batteries gave out. Writing by flashlight. Thank God for old technology that doesn't depend on circuits. Tried reaching the hospital 15 minutes ago on the hardened military radio. Got through to Elvira for maybe 30 seconds before that went dead too. Her last words, life support systems failing. Switching to manual ventilation. If this is what I think it is, then nothing. Orion's convinced this was a nuclear EMP. High altitude detonation, maybe 200 miles up. Big enough to cover the entire eastern seaboard. The math works. The timing, the geographic pattern of failures, the electromagnetic signature. 3 coordinated blasts, he thinks. 1 over each coast and 1 over the Midwest. If he's right, we're not talking about a natural disaster. This is warfare. The phones went dead at 21:15. Not just cellular, landlines too. Even the old analog systems that should have survived. The pulse must have been massive to penetrate that deep into hardened infrastructure. No air traffic control. No emergency services dispatch. No coordination between agencies. For the first time in my career, I'm completely cut off from the emergency response network. We're going to the hospital. On foot. Field notes. Time, 22:30 estimated. Location, en route to regional medical center. The city is dying. That's the only way to describe what we're seeing. Not dead dying, like watching someone bleed out in slow motion. Traffic lights dark, but cars still moving in some areas. The older vehicles, pre-1970s mostly, seem unaffected. Everything else is stalled where the EMP hit them. Some drivers managed to coast to the side of the road. Others didn't. Intersection of 5th and Main, 3-car pileup. No injuries visible, but no emergency response either. No ambulances, no fire trucks, no police. People are just standing around, trying to figure out what to do. Some good Samaritans helping, but most looking lost. Orion spotted the first fire 20 minutes ago. Apartment complex on the east side, probably started by an electrical surge before the power died. No firefighting response. The building's just burning while people watch from the street. How many fires can a city survive without fire departments? He asked. I don't want to think about that answer. The streetlights failed in sequence as we walked. Not like a power outage, more like they were dying one by one. Some flickering, some going dark completely. A few sparking, and then going silent. The electromagnetic pulse is still working through the system, finding new circuits to fry. Sound is different too. No electrical hum. No air conditioners, no traffic signals clicking, no distant radio noise bleeding from car speakers. The city has gone acoustically primitive, just human voices, footsteps, and the wind through dead traffic lights. Field notes continued. Time, 23:15, estimated. Location, medical district approach. Getting close to the hospital. Can see the building in the distance. Emergency lighting still functioning, which means their backup generators are still running. That's something at least. But the neighborhoods between here and there are getting dangerous. Past 2 more fires. People starting to panic as reality sets in. Saw a group breaking into a pharmacy, not violently, just desperately. The electronic locks failed, the alarm systems are dead, and people are realizing there's no way to call for help. Orion rigged a portable radio from components in his toolkit. Analog vacuum tubes, he says, old technology that should survive electromagnetic pulse. Been scanning frequencies for the last hour. Nothing. Not just no responses, no signals at all. No distant AM radio stations, no emergency broadcasts, no aircraft communications. The electromagnetic spectrum sounds like a tomb. How big was this thing? I asked him. Big enough, he said. Maybe big enough to cover half the continent. At 2300 hours, we encountered our first roadblock. Not official, just a group of neighbors who dragged shopping carts across the street. They're not stopping people, just asking questions. Where are you going? What do you know? Have you heard from anyone outside the city? Nobody has answers. The stars are brighter than I've ever seen them in the city. No light pollution. For the first time in decades, the night sky looks the way it did before electricity. It's beautiful and terrifying at the same time. Hospital arrival log. Time, 0:05, estimated day 1. Location, Regional Medical Center, emergency entrance. Found Elvira. She set up a command post in the emergency department, running everything by battery-powered lanterns and handheld flashlights. The backup generators are working, but she's rationing power. Life support equipment only, she says. Everything else runs on manual. The EMP wasn't just one blast. She told us as soon as we found her. There were 3, and they were coordinated. She'd been monitoring radio traffic before the systems failed completely. Caught fragments of military communications, emergency broadcasts from other regions. The attacks hit the East Coast at 1947, the West Coast at 1952 Pacific Time, and the Midwest at 2015 Central. Simultaneous strikes. Someone planned this. This is warfare, Orion said. This is an invasion. Elvira nodded. And we're in the occupied territory now. The hospital is running on crisis protocols I've never seen implemented. Manual ventilation for critical patients. Hand-operated equipment. Nurses calculating drug dosages without computer assistance. It's like watching medicine go backwards 50 years in a single night. Patient count is rising. Not from injuries, from panic. Heart attacks, anxiety episodes, diabetics whose insulin pumps failed, people whose pacemakers stopped working. The EMP didn't just kill our infrastructure. It's killing the people who depended on electronic medical devices. How long can you keep this up? I asked her. With manual operations? Maybe a week if we're careful. But without resupply, without communication, without power for refrigeration. She looked around the emergency department, at the faces lit by flashlight and candlelight. We're not equipped for a pre-industrial world. None of us are. The city outside is going dark building by building. Emergency lighting failing as backup batteries drain. By morning, we'll be living in a world without electricity, without communication, without the infrastructure that keeps 8 million people alive. Orion scanning radio frequencies again, using equipment he jury-rigged from hospital electronics. Static on most bands, but he's picking up something. Listen, he said, handing me the headphones. Faint, scratchy, barely audible through the electromagnetic noise. Nuclear EMP attacks confirmed on 12 major metropolitan areas. Federal response capability severely compromised. Citizens advised to shelter in place indefinitely. This message will repeat. 12 cities. This wasn't just an attack on us. This was a coordinated strike designed to cripple the entire country. We're not dealing with a disaster anymore. We're dealing with the end of the world as we know it. Day 1 to 6 o'clock hours. Regional Emergency Communications Center, backup log. Cale Mercer, emergency coordinator. Dawn came without the usual symphony of electronic noise. No traffic reports crackling over the radio. No cell phone alerts chiming through the building. No distant hum of air conditioning systems cycling on. Just silence, broken only by the scratch of my pen on paper and the sound of our own breathing. I'm writing this by candlelight, using the old paper logbooks we kept for historical reference. Never thought I'd need them again. The view from the hospital's fourth-floor window tells the story better than any report I could file. The city stretches out below us like a corpse, dark veins of streets threading through the skeletal remains of buildings. No streetlights, no traffic signals, no moving vehicles except for a few older models that survived the pulse, mostly cars from the 70s and 80s that Orion identified as having minimal electronic components. Smoke rises from at least 12 locations across the downtown area. Without fire departments, without communication to coordinate response, fires just burn until they run out of fuel. We watched one spread through an entire city block during the night, the orange glow painting everything in hellish light. 3 coordinated strikes, Elvira said again, checking her watch, one of the few timepieces still working. She'd been repeating this fact every few hours, as if saying it enough times would make it less true. High-altitude nuclear detonations. Electromagnetic pulse weapons designed to cripple infrastructure without direct physical destruction. Orion nodded, his engineering background making him our reluctant expert on the technical aspects. Classic military strategy. Disable the enemy's ability to coordinate response while keeping the physical infrastructure intact for later occupation. He paused, staring out at the darkened city. Whoever did this, they want the buildings and roads left standing. They just want us helpless. The implications settled over us like lead blankets. This wasn't a natural disaster we could recover from in weeks or months. This was warfare, and we'd lost the first battle before we even knew it had started. 7:30 hours. The hospital has become an ark in a sea of chaos. Dr. Martinez, the chief administrator, gathered everyone in the main lobby this morning. Patients who could be moved, staff, families who'd been visiting when the pulse hit, and dozens of people from the surrounding neighborhood who'd sought shelter here. Ladies and gentlemen, Martinez began, his voice echoing in the unlit space. I need everyone to understand our situation clearly. This facility has approximately 72 hours of fuel remaining for our backup generator. After that, we'll be operating on manual ventilation for critical patients, hand-pumped suction equipment, and battery-powered monitors that won't last much longer. A woman in the back started crying. Her husband was in the ICU, dependent on life support. The sound carried in the silence like a gunshot. Elvira stepped forward. We're rationing medications, starting immediately. Non-critical prescriptions are suspended. We're converting conference rooms into ward space for incoming patients. And we need volunteers for manual labor, everything from pumping water to helping with patient care. I found myself raising my hand. I can coordinate supply runs and security. My emergency management background. Forget your emergency management background, interrupted a man near the front. I recognized him as Gary Holt, one of the city councilmen who'd been at the hospital visiting someone when the pulse hit. Your protocols were designed for temporary crises. This isn't temporary. This is the new normal. The words hit harder than I expected. He was right. Every emergency procedure I knew assumed eventual return to normal operations, eventual restoration of communications, eventual arrival of outside help. None of that was coming. 10-15 hours. Orion returned from his reconnaissance mission with news that shattered what remained of our illusions. He'd managed to reach the roof of the adjacent office building and used a pair of binoculars to survey the airport. Military transport planes, he reported, his face grim. At least 6 of them landed on the main runway. They're unloading vehicles and personnel. He paused, looking around at our small group. The planes are intact. Whatever technology they're using wasn't affected by the EMP. Elvira frowned. That's impossible. EMP affects all electronic systems. Not if they were hardened against it, Orion replied. Military equipment designed to survive nuclear warfare. Which means whoever launched these attacks has been planning this operation specifically. They knew exactly what they were doing. The room fell silent. The realization that we weren't dealing with terrorists or rogue states, but with a sophisticated military operation designed to occupy rather than destroy, changed everything. We weren't disaster survivors waiting for rescue. We were civilians under military occupation. 12:45 hours. The first execution happened at noon. We heard the gunshots from the street below. Single shots, methodical, spaced about 30 seconds apart. Orion and I went to the window and saw them. Soldiers in unfamiliar uniforms setting up a checkpoint at the intersection of 5th and Madison. They'd lined up about 20 people against the wall of the pharmacy. Jesus Christ, Orion whispered. They're shooting anyone with electronics. Through the binoculars, I could see the pattern. Each person was searched. Anyone found carrying cell phones, tablets, even digital watches, was separated from the group. Those without electronics were given some kind of identification card and sent on their way. The others? I stopped counting after the 8th shot. They're eliminating anyone who might have retained communication capability, I said, my voice barely steady. Anyone who might coordinate resistance. Behind us, Elvira was quietly moving patients away from the street-side windows. She'd figured out the same thing we had. Visibility from the street made us targets. 15-20 hours. The hospital's generator failed. Not because we ran out of fuel, we still had 36 hours worth, but because the EMP damage to the control circuitry finally cascaded into complete system failure. Orion had been predicting this, explaining how electromagnetic pulse effects weren't always immediate, that some systems would degrade over days as damaged components finally gave up. The silence when the generator died was absolute. No ventilators, no monitors, no lights. Just the sound of 93 people trying not to panic in the sudden darkness. Dr. Martinez's voice cut through the fear. Emergency protocols now. Manual ventilation teams to the ICU. Battery packs for critical monitors only. Everyone else remain calm and stay put. But staying put wasn't an option anymore. Through the windows, we could see the military checkpoint expanding, more soldiers arriving, systematic house-to-house searches beginning 3 blocks away. They were moving methodically through the city, processing civilians, separating those they considered useful from those they considered threats. And hospitals would be high-priority targets. Medical facilities, communications equipment, trained personnel who might organize resistance. 17:45 hours. Elvira found me in the supply closet, inventorying medications by flashlight. She sat down beside me without speaking, and we listened to the sounds of the hospital adapting to manual operation. Hand-cranked ventilators wheezing in rhythm. Footsteps hurrying through corridors. Hushed conversations as staff explained to families why the machines had gone quiet. "How many people do you think are going to die because of this?" she asked. I didn't answer immediately. I'd been running calculations in my head all day. Insulin-dependent diabetics without refrigeration. Cardiac patients without pacemakers or monitoring equipment. Dialysis patients with no functioning machines. Surgery impossible without proper lighting and electrical equipment. In this hospital, maybe 30% over the next 2 weeks, I said finally. In the city, if winter comes before infrastructure is restored. I trailed off. The numbers were too large to process. And if it's never restored? That was the question none of us wanted to ask. What if this wasn't temporary? What if the goal was permanent regression to pre-industrial society? What if the military occupation wasn't planning to rebuild the infrastructure, but to control a population dependent on subsistence-level survival? Then we learn to live without it, I said. Or we die trying. 20-30 hours. The radio worked. Orion had been tinkering with salvaged components for hours, trying to build something that could pick up signals from outside the affected area. Finally, around 8:30, static resolved into human voices. Federal Emergency Management Agency has confirmed coordinated electromagnetic pulse attacks on 12 major metropolitan areas across the continental United States. Washington, D.C., New York, Chicago, Los Angeles, Houston, Philadelphia, Phoenix, San Antonio, San Diego, Dallas, San Jose, and Austin have all reported complete infrastructure failure consistent with high-altitude nuclear EMP detonation. The voice was calm, professional, reading from a prepared statement. It continued with technical details about electromagnetic pulse effects, estimated casualty numbers, and federal response coordination. But what it didn't say was more important than what it did. No mention of rescue operations for affected cities. No timeline for infrastructure restoration. No promises of aid or relief supplies. Just advice to shelter in place indefinitely and await further instructions from local military authorities. We're on our own. 22:15 hours. Dr. Martinez called everyone together for what he termed realistic planning. The hospital couldn't function as a medical facility without power. We could keep maybe 20 critical patients alive using manual equipment, but the building itself was becoming a liability. Too visible. Too much of a target. Too many people to hide or protect. We need to start thinking about dispersal, he said. Small groups, rural areas, locations where we can survive long-term without infrastructure. He looked around at the assembled staff and families. This isn't evacuation. This isn't temporary relocation. This is permanent resettlement. The word hung in the air like smoke. Resettlement. The end of the world we'd known. The beginning of something completely different. Elvira spoke up. What about the patients who can't be moved? We do what we can for as long as we can, Martinez replied. But we have to accept that some battles can't be won. Our responsibility now is to the living who have a chance at survival. I understood the logic, but the reality was crushing. We were talking about medical triage on a civilizational scale, deciding who had enough chance of survival to justify resources, abandoning those who couldn't adapt quickly enough to the new reality. 23:45 hours. I'm ending this log entry because tomorrow everything changes. We've decided to split into 3 groups, one staying with the critical patients for as long as possible, one heading north toward rural areas where small communities might survive independently, and one going underground, literally, using the city's tunnel systems to avoid military detection while organizing resistance. Elvira is staying with the patients. Her medical skills are too valuable, and she can't abandon people who need her care. Orion volunteered for the tunnel group, believing his engineering knowledge might help establish covert communication networks. I'm leading the rural resettlement group, using my emergency management background to coordinate evacuation and survival planning. This is the last entry I'll make in this location. Tomorrow we leave the world we knew behind and begin building whatever comes next. If anyone finds this record, understand that we didn't choose this. We didn't want civilization to end, but when it did, we chose to survive rather than simply endure. The old world ended at 11:47 a.m. yesterday. The new world begins at dawn. Day 3, Emergency Communications Log, Cale Mercer. Location, St. Mary's Hospital, Emergency Command Post. Status, infrastructure critical, no external communications. The water stopped flowing this morning. Not completely, there's still pressure in the system, but it's dropping hour by hour. Orion calculated we've got maybe 18 hours before the municipal pumps fail entirely. After that, it's whatever's left in the rooftop tanks and the emergency reserves in the basement. For 400 people. I keep trying to think like the emergency coordinator I was 72 hours ago. Establish priorities. Allocate resources. Maintain order. But those protocols assumed backup systems, assumed help was coming, assumed this was temporary. This isn't temporary. Day 3 to 14:30 hours. Elvira called another leadership meeting in the old conference room. We've been meeting every 6 hours since the hospital became. What do you call it when a medical facility becomes a refugee camp? When doctors become wardens and patients become residents. We need to talk about the insulin, she said without preamble. Always direct, Elvira. It's what made her good at emergency medicine, and what makes her essential now. The numbers are brutal. 12 diabetic patients, including that teenager, Marcus, whose parents brought him in during the first night of chaos. We had maybe a week's worth of refrigerated insulin when the power died. Now we're down to 3 days, and it's degrading faster in the heat. The backup generator? I asked, though I already knew the answer. Orion shook his head. EMP fried the control circuits. I can bypass them, maybe, but I need parts. Specific parts. And they're not here. The silence stretched between us. Outside the conference room, we could hear the constant murmur of voices, the crying of children, the occasional sharp command from one of the nurses, trying to maintain some semblance of medical routine with 19th century tools. Where? Elvira asked. Power substation 6 blocks north. Commercial district. Maybe the electronics store on 5th Street. Orion's voice was steady, but I caught the hesitation. Problem is, that's downtown, where the fires started. Through the window, we could still see the smoke columns rising from the city center. Without fire departments, without water pressure, the blazes just burn until they run out of fuel. 3 days in, half the downtown district is gone. It's not just the fires, I said. People are getting desperate. Yesterday's looting is today's survival. And tomorrow, I didn't finish the sentence. Tomorrow, people would kill for a can of food or a bottle of clean water. Day 3 to 18:45 hours. Made rounds with Elvira to check on our permanent residents, her term for the people who've made the hospital their home. It's a kind term for what we really are, refugees in our own city. The pediatric ward has become a nursery for families with nowhere else to go. The cardiac unit houses elderly patients who can't be moved and their relatives who won't leave them. The ER is our town hall, where disputes get settled and resources get distributed. Mrs. Chun from 4B cornered me near the elevator bank. Her husband needs dialysis, and we can't provide it without power for the machines. She knows this. We've explained it, but she keeps asking, keeps hoping I'll find some miracle in my emergency management protocols. There has to be something, she said, gripping my arm with surprising strength. You're the emergency man. This is an emergency. I wanted to tell her that my job was to coordinate resources during temporary crises, not to raise the dead or create machines from thin air. Instead, I told her we were doing everything we could. The lie came easily now. Day 3 to 22:15 hours. The evening distribution of food and water went smoothly, which is to say nobody got stabbed. That's become our metric for success. Orion rigged a manual pump system for the rooftop water tanks using spare tubing and a modified hand crank from the physical therapy equipment. It works, but it requires constant manpower. We've organized shifts, 2 hours on, 4 hours off around the clock. Watching people take turns at the pump, I realized something had changed. 3 days ago, these were strangers thrown together by catastrophe. Tonight, I saw Mr. Patterson from the second floor spelling Mrs. Rodriguez so she could check on her grandson. I saw the teenager with the broken leg teaching others how to operate the hand crank efficiently. We're becoming something. Not a hospital staff and patients anymore, not refugees waiting for rescue. We're becoming a community. It should feel hopeful. Instead, it terrifies me. Because communities form when people accept that their current situation is permanent. Day 4 to 6:30 hours. Marcus collapsed during breakfast distribution. Elvira was there in seconds, checking his pulse, his breathing, his response. But we all knew what it meant. The insulin is failing faster than we calculated. His body is starting to shut down. How long? I asked her quietly, while his parents held his hands and whispered reassurances they didn't believe. Without insulin? Maybe days. Maybe hours. She wiped her hands on a towel, the gesture automatic from a lifetime of medical practice. We need those generator parts, Kale. Not next week. Today. I looked across the ER at our community. Families sharing breakfast from canned goods, volunteers organizing medication schedules with handwritten charts, children playing with toys salvaged from the pediatric ward, normal people adapting to an abnormal world. Then I looked at Orion, who was studying a hand-drawn map of the city, marking known hazards and potential supply locations. He caught my eye and nodded slightly. We'll need a team, he said. 3 people, maybe 4. Light and fast. In and out before anyone notices. Too dangerous, Elvira said immediately. We can't risk losing you. Either of you. This community needs power, I interrupted. And Marcus needs insulin refrigeration. And Mrs. Patterson needs her oxygen concentrator working. And 10 other people need things that require electricity. I was making the decision as I spoke, falling back on emergency management training. Assess resources, identify critical needs, accept calculated risks. I'll lead the team, I continued. Orion for technical expertise. We need 2 others, people who know the city, who can move quietly. No. Elvira's voice was flat, final. I won't authorize this. I won't sign death warrants for maybe salvaging parts that might work to possibly extend the life of equipment that will eventually fail anyway. She was right, of course. The generator would fail again. The parts might be damaged or incompatible. The trip might get us killed for nothing. But Marcus was 15 years old, and he was dying because we couldn't keep a refrigerator running. I'm not asking for authorization, I said quietly. I'm telling you what's going to happen. We leave at dawn. Day 4 to 12 o'clock hours. The team assembled in the maintenance bay, myself, Orion, and 2 volunteers from our community. David Kim, who used to manage an electronics repair shop before the world ended, and Sarah Mitchell, a former marathon runner who knew every back street and alley in the commercial district. Elvira met us at the exit, medical kit in hand. Take this, she said, pressing the kit into my hands. Antibiotics, pain medication, basic trauma supplies. Don't be heroes. Don't take unnecessary risks. Just come back. She hugged Orion first, then me. Her whisper was meant for me alone. If you get those parts, if you get the generator running, we buy time. Maybe weeks. But Kale, eventually the fuel will run out, the parts will break again, the medicine will expire. What then? I didn't have an answer. Emergency management is about solving immediate problems, buying time until normal systems can be restored. But normal wasn't coming back. Ever. Then we solved the next problem, I said. And then the one after that. Until we can't. She nodded, understanding. It wasn't a plan. It was just a commitment to keep trying. Day 4 to 14:30 hours, mobile log. Writing this while we wait for the afternoon patrol to pass. We're 3 blocks from the hospital, moving through residential areas that look like movie sets after the apocalypse. Cars stalled in intersections, their electronics fried. Front doors standing open where people fled or went searching for help that never came. The silence is what gets to you. No air conditioners humming, no traffic noise, no electronic buzz that you never noticed until it was gone. Just wind through broken windows and the distant sound of voices calling for lost family members. Orion found fresh tire tracks in the mud near the elementary school. Wide tires, heavy vehicle. Either military or emergency services, but we haven't seen any official response in 3 days. More likely, someone got a pre-electronic vehicle running and decided to go mobile scavenging. Competition. We're not the only ones who need parts. Day 4 to 16:45 hours, mobile log. The power substation was a bust. Flooded basement, control panels corroded beyond repair. But David found something better at the electronics store. A solar panel installation that was damaged but not destroyed. The EMP killed the inverters and charge controllers, but the panels themselves might still generate power. It's not much, David explained, securing panels to the shopping cart we'd commandeered as a transport. Maybe enough to run a small refrigerator, some LED lights. Basic stuff. Basic stuff. 3 days ago, basic stuff was high-speed internet and climate control and machine-brewed coffee. Now basic stuff is keeping medicine cold and having light to read by. Sarah spotted movement 2 blocks over. People moving systematically through storefronts, loading vehicles. Organized. Armed. We're not alone out here, and not everyone is interested in building communities. Day 4 to 19:20 hours. Back at the hospital. The solar installation is crude but functional. Orion has it connected to a small refrigeration unit in the pharmacy. Not enough to power the whole building, barely enough to keep essential medications stable. But Marcus got his insulin injection an hour ago, and his color is already improving. Small victories. Elvira found me in the maintenance room, checking inventory of our salvaged electronics. "You did good today," she said. "All of you. But this is just buying time, you know that." I nodded. "How much time?" "Solar panels will work until they break or get damaged. Could be months, could be years. But eventually," she shrugged. "Eventually, we need to figure out how to live without depending on salvaged pieces of the old world." She was right. We were cannibalizing a dead civilization to keep ourselves alive. But eventually, there wouldn't be anything left to cannibalize. "The people upstairs," I said. "They're not thinking about eventually. They're thinking about tonight, tomorrow, maybe next week. They need to believe we can solve the problems as they come." "And what do you believe?" I looked at the solar panel system, already planning improvements and expansions with materials we didn't have. Emergency management mindset. Identify resources, develop contingencies, prepare for multiple scenarios. "I believe we adapt or we die," I said finally. "And I believe this community has gotten very good at adapting." Day 4 to 23:45 hours. Making final rounds before sleep. The hospital is quieter now. People learning to live without the background hum of electrical systems, settling into rhythms dictated by daylight rather than convenience. Mrs. Chen's husband died this afternoon. Kidney failure, no dialysis. She's staying with her daughter's family in the pediatric ward, helping with the children. Grief and purpose intertwined. Marcus is stable. The insulin is staying cold. The generator parts sit in storage, waiting for the next crisis. But Elvira's question stays with me. What happens when the salvage runs out? I think about the community we're building, the skills we're learning, the bonds forming between strangers who've chosen to face the end of the world together. Maybe that's the answer. Maybe the resource that matters isn't electronics or medication or fuel. Maybe it's the decision to keep solving problems together, one crisis at a time, until we can't. Tomorrow there will be new problems. Water pressure dropping, food supplies dwindling, social tensions rising, medical emergencies we can't treat. But tonight, the lights are on in the pharmacy. Marcus is breathing steadily. The community is safe. Sometimes, emergency management is about buying just enough time for people to figure out how to live with the impossible. Day 4, Emergency Communications Log. Status, manual recording, digital systems inoperative. Location, St. Catherine's Regional Medical Center. Recorder, Cale Mercer, Emergency Communications Coordinator. The fluorescent emergency lighting died 3 hours ago. We're down to candles and flashlights now, rationing batteries like they're gold bars. The silence where machines used to hum is becoming unbearable. No ventilator whoosh, no monitor beeps, no electronic heartbeat keeping people alive. Mrs. Chin died at 0347 hours. I have to write that. Have to make it official somehow, even though there's no system to report to, no database to update, no family notification protocol that means anything anymore. She was 73, post-surgical. Dependent on the ventilator, we'd been operating manually in 12-hour shifts since the EMP hit. Elvira found her when she came to relieve me. The hand pump ventilator system Orion had rigged up had failed. Rubber seal degraded under constant pressure. By the time we noticed, she'd been without assisted breathing for maybe 20 minutes. "We can't save everyone," Elvira said, but her voice cracked saying it. 3 days ago, she would have had 20 different machines keeping Mrs. Chin stable. Now we're back to listening with stethoscopes and hoping our hands are steady enough to keep hearts beating. Tommy Morrison, the diabetic kid from the pediatric ward, slipped into a coma yesterday. 14 years old. His insulin went bad when our improvised refrigeration system couldn't maintain temperature. Elvira's been monitoring his blood sugar with the few test strips we have left, but without proper medication, it's just watching the numbers climb toward inevitability. The moral mathematics of triage used to be theoretical. Now it's keeping me awake in 4-hour shifts while I manually operate life support systems that should be automatic. Day 5, supply assessment. Inventory completed at 0600 hours. The numbers are grim. Insulin, 12 vials remaining, no refrigeration capability. Antibiotics, 3-day supply at current consumption rate. Painkillers, 1 week if we ration severely. Surgical supplies, adequate for minor procedures only. Clean water, 2 days at current consumption, pumps still down. Food, hospital cafeteria stocks depleted. Emergency rations for 48 hours. Orion thinks he can restore limited power if he can salvage components from the electrical substation 6 blocks north. Just enough for basic life support, he said, sketching diagrams by candlelight. Maybe run 1 refrigeration unit, keep essential medications stable. The substation is in the downtown core, where we've been hearing gunshots since yesterday. Groups fighting over resources, I think. The police station went dark, same as everything else. No coordination, no backup, no help coming. "It's too dangerous," I told him. "We can't risk losing you for a maybe." "We can't save Tommy without insulin refrigeration," he said. "Mrs. Patterson needs her heart medication cool. The antibiotics are degrading in this heat." He's right, but sending our only electrical engineer into a war zone feels like trading certain expertise for uncertain rewards. Without Orion, we're back to medieval medicine permanently. Elvira sided with him. "We took an oath to do no harm," she said. "Letting people die when we might prevent it, that's harm through inaction. So we're planning the salvage mission for tomorrow morning. Orion, plus 3 volunteers from the hospital maintenance staff. They'll take the pickup truck that still runs, one of the few vehicles old enough to survive the electromagnetic pulse. I keep thinking about the emergency protocols we used to follow. Clear chain of command, resource allocation matrices, standardized response procedures. Now we're making life and death decisions based on who speaks loudest in the candlelit conference room. Day 6, breaking point. The salvage team left at dawn, 8 hours ago. Radio silence since 1400 hours when Orion reported reaching the substation. Looks intact from outside, were his last words. Going in to assess damage. I've been trying to raise them every 30 minutes using the hand crank radio system we cobbled together. Nothing but static and the occasional distant transmission from groups we can't identify. The city's burning. We can see smoke columns from the hospital's upper floors, thick, black smoke that suggests major structural fires. Without fire department response capability, once something starts burning, it just burns until there's nothing left. Elvira's been moving between patient rooms like a ghost. Lost 2 more people today. Mr. Rodriguez from complications after his appendectomy. Infection set in without proper antibiotic coverage. And Sarah Kim, a car accident victim whose internal bleeding we couldn't control without surgical equipment that requires power we don't have. "This isn't medicine," she said after Sarah died. "This is just watching people die more slowly. The hospital's becoming a refugee center by default. People from the surrounding neighborhoods keep arriving, looking for safety, medical help, answers we don't have. We're housing maybe 200 people now in a facility designed for normal operations with full power and supply chains. Food fights broke out in the cafeteria today. Actual fights. Over packets of crackers and canned peaches that wouldn't have fed one person properly before all this started. I had to organize a security rotation using hospital maintenance staff and volunteer patients who are mobile enough to stand guard. Resource allocation meetings are becoming shouting matches. Do we use the remaining batteries for medical equipment or communication attempts? Do we ration the purified water equally or prioritize the most critical patients? Do we turn away new refugees or stretch our supplies even thinner? Questions I never trained for, decisions that used to have protocols and oversight and legal frameworks. Now it's just us, making choices that determine who lives and who dies. Day 7, the return. Orion came back, not walking. Rodriguez and Martinez carried him in the bed of the pickup truck, both of them covered in dust and something that looked like dried blood. The truck's windshield was spiderwebbed with cracks and bullet holes stitched across the passenger door. Building collapse. The electrical substation's roof had been weakened by the EMP surge, something about the metal framework conducting and then releasing electromagnetic energy that compromised the structural integrity. Orion was inside checking junction boxes when it came down. "He saved my life," Rodriguez said. "Saw the ceiling starting to sag, pushed me toward the exit. Took the worst of it himself. Massive internal injuries. Crushed ribs, probable internal bleeding, definite spinal damage. In a normal hospital, with full surgical capability and imaging equipment, he might have had a chance. Here, with manual examination and improvised treatment, Elvira did everything possible. Stabilized him as best she could, managed his pain with our dwindling supplies of morphine, made him comfortable. But we all knew. He was conscious when they brought him in. First thing he said, 'Got the components. Voltage regulators are intact. You can restore partial power to the critical care unit.' Even dying, still trying to solve the problem. Still believing we could engineer our way out of this nightmare. Orion died at 2,347 hours, day 7. I held his hand while his breathing slowed, then stopped. Elvira recorded time of death in the ledger we're keeping for records no one may ever read. Martinez and Rodriguez helped me move his body to the makeshift morgue we've established in the hospital's sub-basement. 17 people now. 17 deaths since the EMP hit a week ago. 17 failures of our medical system, our planning, our ability to adapt fast enough to save lives without the technological infrastructure we'd depended on completely. The electrical components are sitting in the maintenance room. Voltage regulators, circuit breakers, copper wiring. Everything Orion thought we needed to restore basic power. But Orion isn't here to install them, and none of us have his expertise. We're back to medieval medicine, but now we're medieval doctors too. Day 7, late entry. Smoke on the horizon has gotten thicker. The fires downtown aren't burning out, they're spreading. Wind's picking up, and I can smell burning plastic and chemicals mixed with wood smoke. The city's industrial section is probably going up, all those warehouses and manufacturing facilities with no fire suppression systems working. Elvira's organizing an evacuation plan. "If the fires reach the hospital district, we'll need to move everyone," she said. 200 people, including bedridden patients, with no motorized transport and limited supplies. Where do we go? The suburban areas might be safer from fire, but they're also where the resource conflicts seem to be concentrated. Rural areas might have cleaner air and water sources, but no medical facilities or shelter for this many people. I keep staring at the radio equipment, hoping for some transmission that makes sense of all this. Federal response, state coordination, international aid, something that suggests civilization still exists somewhere and help might eventually come. Nothing but static and the occasional panicked voice from individual survivors, calling for loved ones who may or may not still be alive. Tommy Morrison died tonight. His blood sugar spiked beyond what we could manage without proper medication. Elvira stayed with him through the final hours, holding his hand, talking quietly about his dog back home, his plans for high school next year, normal life things that don't exist anymore. 14 years old. Dead because insulin requires refrigeration, and refrigeration requires electricity, and electricity requires infrastructure we can't rebuild fast enough to save lives. I used to coordinate emergency responses. Traffic accidents, weather events, industrial incidents, problems with solutions, protocols to follow, resources to deploy. This isn't an emergency anymore. This is just life now. Permanent crisis, permanent resource scarcity, permanent decisions about who lives and who dies. The emergency never ends when the emergency becomes normal. Day 8, Emergency Communications Log. Location, Regional Medical Center, basement level. Author, Cale Mercer, Emergency Communications Coordinator. Equipment, salvaged radio receiver, modified Perot. Hale's notes. The static finally broke at 0347 hours. 8 days of silence, and then voices. Real human voices cutting through the electromagnetic wasteland that used to be our communication grid. I'd been working on Orion's radio modifications for 3 straight nights, following his handwritten notes by candlelight. His engineering sketches looked like hieroglyphics to me, but desperation makes you learn fast. Repeat, Operation Blackout Phase 1 complete. 12 metropolitan targets confirmed offline. Infrastructure degradation at 94% effectiveness. Proceeding to Phase 2 deployment in 72 hours. My hands shook as I adjusted the frequency. Military transmission, encrypted but not well enough. The voice had an accent I couldn't place. Eastern European, maybe Russian. The signal was strong, close range. Phase 1. 12 targets. We weren't alone. I grabbed my logbook, started transcribing everything. After 8 days of managing this hospital refugee camp with nothing but guesswork and prayer, real intelligence felt like oxygen to a drowning man. Civilian population response within predicted parameters. Infrastructure dependency exceeded projections. Recommend accelerating occupation timeline. Occupation. The word hit me like ice water. This wasn't random terrorism. This wasn't even war in any conventional sense. This was systematic conquest, designed to cripple without destroying, to weaken without killing. They wanted the infrastructure intact and the population helpless. I'd been thinking about this all wrong. We'd been waiting for rescue, for federal response, for some kind of restoration. But there was no cavalry coming. There was only invasion. Cale. Elvira's voice behind me, exhausted. She'd been pulling 18-hour shifts, keeping people alive with manual ventilation and scavenged supplies. You found something? I turned the volume up. More voices now, different accents, coordinating logistics. Troop movements. Supply lines. Timetables. Listen to this, I whispered. Medical personnel inventory shows adequate numbers for population management. Recommend preservation of healthcare workers for collaboration. Elvira's face went pale. Collaboration? They're not here to destroy us, I said, pieces falling into place. They're here to manage us. The EMP wasn't an attack, it was a reset button. Send us back to the 1800s while they walk in with 21st century equipment. She sank into the chair beside me, processing. That's why they targeted electronics specifically. Physical infrastructure intact, but no way to coordinate resistance or call for help. Exactly. And look at the timing. I pulled out my incident log from day 1. The attacks hit at 2000 hours local time across all targets. Coordinated to the minute. That's not terrorism, that's military precision. The radio crackled again. Different frequency this time. Civilian assets categorized as follows: medical personnel for retention, technical specialists for relocation, general population for processing. Processing. The clinical language made my skin crawl. There's more, I said, turning to face her fully. Elvira, I need to ask you something, and I need the truth. Did you know this was coming? Her silence lasted too long. The day before, she finally said. Dr. Sarah Chun from the CDC called me. We worked together during the bird flu outbreak 3 years ago. She said something about taking a sudden vacation, recommended I do the same. Said there were concerning atmospheric readings that might affect medical equipment. Atmospheric readings? I thought she meant solar flares. She was cryptic, scared. Said she couldn't say more over the phone. Elvira's voice cracked. I should have listened. Should have evacuated the ICU patients. Someone knew, I said. Federal level. They had warning, and they chose not to share it. Or they couldn't. Maybe the attack was too well coordinated, happened too fast. I switched frequencies again, scanning for more transmissions. Found another military channel, this one speaking English with American accents. NORAD confirms 12 EMP detonations. Federal continuity protocols in effect. Military bases Alpha through Zulu report operational status green. Civilian relief operations postponed pending threat assessment. Jesus, I breathed. Our own military is operational. They're not responding because they're protecting themselves first. That makes sense, Elvira said grimly. If this is coordinated invasion, military installations would be primary targets for conventional follow-up attacks. But it means we're on our own. Completely. I kept scanning, picking up fragments. The picture emerging was worse than I'd imagined. The EMP attacks were surgical, targeted to disable civilian infrastructure, while leaving military installations mostly intact. But the invasion force had planned for that too, bringing electromagnetic-hardened equipment that could operate in the post-EMP environment. How long do we have? Elvira asked. Based on these transmissions? Maybe 72 hours before the first occupation forces arrive. They're moving systematically, securing major population centers first. What about the rural areas? Lower priority. They're betting that urban populations will be too busy surviving to coordinate resistance, and rural populations don't have the numbers to matter. They're wrong about that second part, Elvira said. Farm communities know how to survive without electricity. They'll organize faster than city people. Maybe, but they won't have the medical knowledge to keep their populations healthy or the technical skills to build communications equipment. I turned back to Orion's notes, scattered across the table beside the radio. His handwriting was precise, methodical. Engineering diagrams for amplifying weak signals, boosting transmission range, even plans for a basic repeater network using salvaged components. He knew, I said suddenly. Orion. He wasn't just trying to fix the hospital generator. Look at these plans. Elvira leaned over the notebook. These are communication network designs, not power restoration. He was building a resistance network. That's why he went to the power plant, not for electrical components, but for radio transmission equipment. He knew we'd need to coordinate with other survivor groups. The radio squawked again. New frequency, weaker signal. Anyone out there? This is Riverside Medical. We've got 43 survivors and we're running out of insulin. Can anyone hear us? I grabbed the microphone, adjusted the transmitter settings according to Orion's notes. Riverside Medical, this is Regional Medical Center. We copy your transmission. Static then, thank God. We thought we were alone. How many survivors do you have? Over 200. We've established basic medical care and resource sharing. What's your status? Critical. We've got diabetic patients going into coma, no refrigeration for medications. Maybe 12 hours before we start losing people. I looked at Elvira. She was already calculating. We can help, I transmitted. We've got a manual cooling system and some insulin reserves. But you'll need to come to us. We can't risk transport. Copy that. How do we find you? I gave directions, using landmarks that would still be recognizable without GPS. As we talked, I realized Orion had been right. Individual survival wasn't enough. We needed networks, communication, coordination. There are others, the Riverside operator said. We've been picking up fragments from at least 6 different locations. All medical facilities, all trying to keep people alive. Can you relay our frequency to them? Already did. You're about to get very popular. Over the next hour, 7 different survivor groups made contact. Hospital, clinic, nursing home, even a veterinary school with medical supplies. Each group had different resources, different needs, different expertise. This is how we survive, I told Elvira as we plotted locations on a salvaged city map. Not as individuals, not even as single communities. As a network. Orion would be proud, she said quietly. He made this possible. These modifications, these plans, he was building the foundation for organized resistance. The military transmissions were still coming through, increasingly detailed. Troop movements, supply convoys, occupation protocols. I transcribed everything, building a picture of what was coming. They're expecting compliance, I said, reviewing the intelligence. Their plans assume most of the population will accept occupation in exchange for restored services. Food, medical care, basic utilities. Some will, Elvira said. Especially families with children, elderly people who can't survive without modern medicine. But not all. And if we can coordinate the ones who won't comply, we become a problem they didn't plan for. The radio crackled with another incoming transmission. One of the survivor groups panicked. Vehicles approaching from the east. Military vehicles moving slow. They're stopping at every building. Oh God, they're here already. The transmission cut to static. 72 hours just became 0, I said. Elvira was already moving toward the door. I need to prep the medical staff. If they're taking healthcare workers for collaboration, I need to know who's willing to resist and who might cooperate. Wait, I caught her arm. If they're categorizing medical personnel for retention, that means they need us alive. It's leverage. It's also a trap. They offer medical supplies, basic utilities, safety for our patients, in exchange for compliance with whatever they're planning. Processing, I said, remembering the clinical term from the intercepted transmission. Population control, relocation, camps. Her voice was hollow. The infrastructure stays intact because they're planning to use it, but not for us. I looked at Orion's notebook, at the radio equipment, at the map showing survivor locations. A network was forming, but it was fragile, untested. We have a choice, I said. Comply and hope they keep their promises about medical care. Or resist and risk everything. There's a third option, Elvira said. We play along long enough to gather intelligence, then use our medical access to help the resistance. That's incredibly dangerous. So is everything else now. The radio squawked again. Multiple transmissions overlapping, survivor groups sharing intelligence, coordinating resources, reporting movements. The network was growing stronger even as the threat closed in. Orion was right, I said. This is how we survive. Not by hiding, not by complying, by staying connected. Even if it gets us killed, especially then. Because if we don't resist now while we still can, there won't be anything left worth saving. Outside, I could hear the distant rumble of vehicles. Heavy engines getting closer. The occupation was beginning, but so was the resistance. Technical notes. Radio equipment operational, using EMP-hardened modifications. 7 survivor medical facilities confirmed in communication range. Occupation forces estimated 24 to 48 hours from current position. Intelligence gathering ongoing via intercepted military transmissions. Resistance network formation in progress. Resource status. Medical supplies, 6 days remaining at current consumption. Food stores, 12 days with strict rationing. Water, adequate, manual pumping system operational. Fuel, 3 days for essential heating/cooking. Personnel, total survivors, 247. Medical staff, 31. Technical specialists, 8. General population, 208. Next priority, establish secure communication protocols with resistance network before occupation forces arrive. Day 11 Emergency Communications Center, relocated, St. Mary's Hospital. Time, 0600 hours. The radio crackles to life with a sound I haven't heard in 11 days. Clear, unbroken transmission. Not the usual static-filled whispers we've been catching from scattered survivor groups, but professional military communication with proper encryption protocols. All civilian populations in Grid Sector 7 Alpha. This is Colonel Martinez, 3rd Infantry Division. We are establishing humanitarian aid stations at the following coordinates. I adjust the frequency on Orion's rebuilt transceiver, my hand steady despite the implications. Through the hospital's broken windows, I can see Elvira coordinating the morning medical rounds with our remaining staff. 43 patients still under our care, 67 refugees sheltering in the lower floors, and now this. The transmission continues with GPS coordinates that mean nothing to our dead navigation systems, but I recognize the locations from my emergency management training. Strategic positions, highway intersections, water treatment facilities, power substations. Classic occupation checkpoints. Kale. Elvira appears in the doorway, her medical coat stained with everything from blood to diesel fuel from our scavenging runs. Did you catch that broadcast? Military relief, I tell her, though the words taste wrong. They want civilians to report for processing and relocation. She crosses to the window, staring out at the smoke still rising from the city center. The fires have burned for 3 days now, and without functioning fire departments, entire neighborhoods have been reduced to ash. Processing, she repeats. That's not relief terminology. No, it isn't. In emergency management, we use words like evacuation, shelter, assistance. Processing is what you do to inventory, to resources, to things you need to categorize and control. The radio squawks again. Repeat, all medical personnel are classified as essential assets and must report immediately for reassignment to critical care facilities. Elvira's face goes pale. Essential assets. I shut off the transceiver. We both know what that means. 11 days ago, I would have called it bureaucratic language, the kind of clinical terminology that emerges in crisis situations. Now, after watching our world collapse one system at a time, I recognize it for what it is, the language of occupation. How long do we have? She asks. I check my hand wound watch, a gift from my grandfather that's become more valuable than any smartphone. Based on the transmission strength and grid coordinates, advanced scouts will reach our perimeter within 6 hours. Main force probably 12 to 18 hours behind them. She nods, that quick, decisive gesture I've learned to recognize as her shifting into crisis mode. I need to check on the dialysis patients, and we'll need to make decisions about who can travel. Travel. The word hangs between us like a bridge we're not sure we can cross. Day 11, 0900 hours. The community meeting fills the hospital's main lobby, voices echoing off broken glass and improvised barricades. 43 patients, 67 refugees, 12 remaining hospital staff, and the handful of technical specialists who've joined us since the collapse. 122 people looking to Elvira and me for answers we don't have. The way I see it, says Marcus, the hospital's head of security, we've got 3 options: fight, run, or surrender. Murmurs ripple through the crowd. Mrs. Chun, caring for her diabetic grandson, raises her voice above the noise. My boy can't walk more than a few blocks. How are we supposed to run? And surrender to what? Adds Dave, one of the electrical engineers who's been helping maintain our generator. They're calling medical staff essential assets. That's not rescue language. I stand, feeling the weight of every emergency management decision I've ever made. But those were localized disasters: hurricanes, chemical spills, building collapses. Events with clear timelines and established recovery protocols. This is something else entirely. I've been monitoring military frequencies, I begin. What we're hearing isn't consistent with humanitarian relief operations. The terminology, the positioning, the coordination patterns, this looks like occupation protocol. The room falls silent except for the distant sound of diesel generators and the occasional crack of settling debris from damaged buildings. Elvira steps forward. I've been in contact with Dr. Rahman at University Hospital through the amateur radio network. They received the same transmission yesterday. When their medical staff reported for reassignment, they were loaded into trucks and transported to what the military called consolidated medical facilities. No one has heard from them since. The silence stretches longer now, heavy with implications. So what do we do? Asks Sarah, one of our nurses. We have critical patients, people who'll die without medical support. It's the question that's been eating away at me for 3 days, ever since we intercepted the first encrypted military communications. Emergency management training covers evacuations, resource allocation, interagency coordination. It doesn't cover choosing between abandoning the people you're sworn to protect and surrendering to forces that treat human beings as inventory. We split up, I say finally. Those who can travel, we evacuate to the rural safe zones. We've been in contact with survivor communities 30 miles north, agricultural areas with natural water sources and minimal electromagnetic infrastructure to begin with. They can absorb small groups. And those who can't travel? Mrs. Chen's voice carries the weight of every family facing impossible choices. Elvira answers before I can. I stay with the critical patients, along with essential medical staff. We negotiate from a position of value. They need medical expertise, and we provide it in exchange for humane treatment. The room erupts in protests. That's suicide, Marcus says bluntly. You heard the radio traffic. They're not negotiating. Maybe not, Elvira replies. But someone has to stay with patients who can't be moved. And medical neutrality has protected healthcare workers in conflict zones for over a century. I want to argue, to find some emergency protocol that covers this situation, some contingency plan that saves everyone. But 11 days of cascading system failures have taught me that not every crisis has a solution that saves everyone. Day 11 to 1,400 hours. The evacuation preparations reveal how far we've fallen from our technological dependencies. No GPS navigation, so we're using paper maps and compass bearings. No encrypted communications, so we're relying on predetermined rally points and analog signals. No motorized transport for most of the route. The few vehicles still running after the EMP need their fuel for emergency medical transport. I'm helping Dave load the portable radio equipment when Elvira finds me in what used to be the hospital's IT center. I need you to take this, she says, handing me a manila folder thick with handwritten notes. Inside are detailed medical records for every patient we've treated since the collapse, along with what looks like intelligence reports, troop movements, communication intercepts, resource assessments. Information that would be invaluable to other survivor communities. How did you? The medical neutrality protocol, she explains. I've been treating their advanced scouts. Officially, for humanitarian reasons. Unofficially, they've been sharing information about deployment schedules, resource needs, command structure. I stare at the intelligence summaries, recognizing the systematic approach of someone trained in emergency information management. Troop strength estimates, supply line vulnerabilities, communication frequencies. The kind of intelligence that could help scattered survivor communities coordinate resistance efforts. They trust you. They need me. 3 of their soldiers have infections that require antibiotic treatment we've been providing. Their field medics aren't equipped for complex care. She meets my eyes. But they also suspect I'm gathering intelligence, which means once you're evacuated, my usefulness has a limited shelf life. The folder feels heavier than it should. There has to be another way. There is. Take this information to the rural communities. Help them coordinate. Build a communication network that can warn other survivor groups about occupation tactics. She glances toward the lobby where families are making final preparations. Make sure what we learned here helps someone else survive. Day 11 to 1,700 hours. The advanced scouts arrive exactly when I predicted. 3 Humvees with mounted communications equipment, diesel engines running clean and steady. The sound of functional technology feels alien after 11 days of mechanical silence. From our observation post on the hospital's 3rd floor, I watch through binoculars as uniformed figures set up a command post in the parking lot. Professional, efficient, coordinated. Everything our desperate community isn't. 8 soldiers visible, I report to Dave, who's operating our last functioning radio. Mobile command unit, satellite communication array, medical equipment. They're not here to fight, Dave observes. This is a processing operation. Below, I see Elvira walk out the main entrance, hands visible, wearing her cleanest medical coat with a Red Cross armband she improvised from torn fabric. The universal symbol of medical neutrality that's supposed to protect healthcare workers in conflict zones. I key the radio handset. Final evacuation group, this is Kale. Execute movement plan in 15 minutes. Rally point Alpha as discussed. Acknowledgements crackle back from the 3 groups that will attempt to reach rural safe zones. 43 people total, including Mrs. Chun and her grandson, Marcus and the mobile patients, and Dave with our salvage technical equipment. 79 people staying with Elvira at the hospital. Through the binoculars, I watch her approach the command post. The conversation appears cordial, medical professional to military personnel, discussing patient care and resource needs. But I notice the soldiers positioning themselves to control access routes, the casual way they catalog visible hospital resources, the communications specialist setting up what looks like surveillance equipment. Processing operations, not humanitarian relief. Day 11 to 1,800 hours. Kale, you need to move now. Dave's voice carries urgency as he monitors multiple radio frequencies simultaneously. I'm picking up main force communications. ETA 90 minutes. The final evacuation group assembles in the hospital's loading dock. 17 people carrying everything they'll need to rebuild basic civilization. Medical supplies, technical manuals, communication equipment, and Elvira's intelligence folder that might help other communities avoid our situation. Mrs. Chin approaches as I do final equipment checks. Her grandson looks pale but alert, his improvised insulin regimen holding steady enough for travel. Will we see them again? She asks, nodding toward the main hospital where Elvira continues her negotiations. I don't have protocols for this question. Emergency management deals with temporary relocations, short-term sheltering, eventual return to normalcy. Not permanent separation from people who've become family through shared survival. I don't know, I tell her honestly. But the information we're carrying could help dozens of other communities. Maybe hundreds. That has to count for something. She nods, the gesture of someone who's made too many impossible choices in the past 11 days. Day 11 to 1845 hours. We move through the city's ruins using routes we've memorized during scavenging runs, avoiding main streets where debris blocks passage, staying away from areas where structural damage makes buildings unstable, navigating by landmarks that haven't changed since the collapse. The absence of normal urban sounds remains jarring. No traffic hum, no air conditioning, no electronic devices. Just wind through broken windows, the creak of settling debris, and our own careful footsteps on glass-covered pavement. 2 miles from the hospital, Dave's portable radio picks up encrypted military communications. The main force has arrived. We pause in the shadow of a collapsed overpass while Dave adjusts frequencies, trying to maintain contact with Elvera's emergency beacon, a small transmitter that should signal if the hospital situation becomes critical. Multiple vehicle signatures, Dave reports quietly. They're not just establishing an aid station. This is a full occupation deployment. Through gaps in the overpass structure, we can see lights in the distance, the first electric illumination we've witnessed since the EMP blast. Military generators providing power for their equipment while the surrounding city remains dark. The radio crackles with Elvera's voice, transmitted on our emergency frequency. Package delivered successfully. Patient stable. Proceeding with extended care protocols. Code phrases we established before the evacuation. Package delivered means the intelligence was successfully passed to the military contacts. Extended care protocols means she's committed to staying with the patients indefinitely. I key the handset for final transmission. Understood. Safe travels. Her response comes back immediately. Take care of each other. Then silence as we switch off the radio to avoid detection. Day 11 to 2,200 hours. 4 hours of careful movement brings us to the city's edge, where suburban developments give way to agricultural land. The evacuation route follows abandoned railroad tracks, using the raised embankment to avoid road checkpoints while maintaining clear navigation. Behind us, the city glows with artificial light for the first time since the collapse. Military generators, floodlights, communication arrays, all the electronic infrastructure that died 11 days ago, now restored under foreign control. Looks like home, says Marcus grimly. It's not, I reply. Home was the world we built together. That's what we're carrying forward. The intelligence folder in my pack contains more than troop movements and supply schedules. It holds 11 days of survival experience, community organization techniques, technical improvisation methods, and medical protocols adapted to post-collapse conditions. Information that could help other survivor groups avoid our mistakes and build on our successes. Ahead, Dave's radio picks up faint transmissions from the agricultural communities that have agreed to shelter evacuees. Coordinate confirmations, resource assessments, security protocols. The beginning of a communication network that spans beyond individual survival groups. We walk toward those signals, carrying everything we've learned about surviving the end of the technological world. Behind us, the city burns with occupied light, but ahead lies something different. Communities that might rebuild civilization on their own terms, using their own values, making their own choices about what technologies to restore and what dependencies to abandon. The emergency never ended. It just became our new normal. But for the first time in 11 days, that doesn't feel like defeat. Emergency communications log, day 30. Location, Millfield Agricultural Station, coordinates, manual survey. Recorder, Cale Mercer, settlement coordinator. Population, 247 souls. The pencil feels strange in my hand after 30 days. We found a cache of old paper ledgers in the station office, the kind farmers used before everything went digital. Ironic that our most advanced record-keeping technology is now a number 2 pencil and line paper from 1987. The morning radio check brought mixed news. 3 new communities established contact overnight, survivors from the metro suburbs who finally got basic transmitters working. Total network now includes 18 settlements across what used to be the tri-state region. We're calling it the Analog Network. Fitting name for our new world. Dr. Sarah Chun completed her weekly medical rounds yesterday. She trained under Elvera at City General before everything. Says our mortality rate dropped to near normal levels once we established the quarantine protocols for new arrivals. Funny how 19th century medical knowledge becomes cutting edge again when you can't manufacture antibiotics. We lost 2 more people last week. Old Margaret Hines finally succumbed to the diabetes we've been managing with rationed insulin from hospital raids. Her last words were thanks for 30 extra days she wouldn't have had without our community. Tommy Reeves died in the generator explosion while trying to repair the water pump. He was 17. Orion would have fixed that pump in minutes, would have known which wires not to cross. I write their names in the back of this log. All 43 we've lost since the settlement began. Emergency management taught me that you track casualties, but it never taught me how their faces follow you into sleep. Resource status update. Medical supplies remain critical. The pharmaceutical raid on Riverside Community Hospital yielded enough insulin for 6 more weeks, but we have 11 diabetics in the settlement. Dr. Chun is training volunteers in herbal medicine. Something that would have seemed like folk nonsense 31 days ago now represents our future healthcare system. Food production exceeded projections. The agricultural station's seed stock survived the EMP intact, and 3 of our residents actually farmed before the attack. Who would have thought that obsolete knowledge would become our salvation? Harvest estimates suggest we'll make it through winter if we maintain strict rationing and no major population growth. Power generation remains our greatest challenge. We have electricity 4 hours daily using the repaired diesel generator, but fuel supplies won't last beyond November. The wind turbine project shows promise. Marcus Webb, former software engineer, turns out to have been building renewable systems as a hobby. Amazing how many people had useless skills that became essential overnight. Water supply stable. The hand-pumped well produces enough for current population with careful conservation. We established wash schedules and gray water recycling protocols that would have seemed primitive 31 days ago, but now represent sophisticated resource management. Security situation. No contact with occupation forces for 12 days. Last confirmed sighting was the patrol that swept through Millbrook Valley, 8 miles southwest. They're systematically clearing survivor communities, relocating populations to what they call administrative zones. From radio intercepts, we know these are essentially labor camps. The perimeter alarm system works better than expected. Tim Rodriguez, former electrician, rigged motion sensors using salvaged components from car alarms. Runs on battery power, recharged by the exercise bikes we converted to generators. Even entertainment serves survival now. Armed resistance remains minimal by necessity. We have hunting rifles and the weapons people owned before the attack, but ammunition is finite. Our defense strategy focuses on avoiding detection rather than fighting pitched battles. We're not soldiers. We're accountants and nurses and teachers trying to stay alive. 3 communities in our network went silent this week. Either captured, destroyed, or their radios finally failed. We maintain radio silence protocols now. Scheduled check-ins only, coded language, frequency rotation. I never thought I'd need to learn guerrilla communication techniques to coordinate food distribution. Social structure evolution. The council system is working. 7 members elected from different specialty groups: medical, technical, agricultural, security, education, logistics, and general population. We vote on resource allocation and settlement policies. Democracy survives even when civilization doesn't. Education program started last week. Rebecca Stone, former high school principal, insisted we couldn't let children lose literacy while learning survival skills. Morning lessons in reading and math, afternoon training in practical skills like water purification and food preservation. The future will need both kinds of knowledge. We established the Archive Project. Every person records their pre-EMP profession and specialized knowledge. Technical manuals, medical procedures, engineering principles, anything that might help rebuild. Sarah suggested we also record personal stories, family histories, cultural knowledge. If we're going to survive as a community, we need to remember who we were. Currency system emerged organically. We trade in work hours and specialized services rather than the old barter system. Dr. Chen's medical skills earn premium rates, but so does Maria Santos's ability to preserve meat and vegetables. Value comes from utility now, not speculation. Communication network status. The analog network grew to 37 settlements this week before 3 went silent. We're mapping survivor populations across the region, sharing resource information and security intelligence. The network represents maybe 60,000 people, a significant population base if we can stay connected and coordinated. Contact with unaffected regions remains sporadic. Shortwave radio occasionally picks up civilian broadcasts from the western states. The war spread beyond the initial EMP targets. Chemical attacks on infrastructure, cyber warfare against financial systems, kinetic strikes on military installations. This was never just about our region. International news suggests global conflict escalating. The attacks weren't isolated to North America. European cities hit by similar EMP strikes, followed by conventional invasion. Asian infrastructure networks targeted by cyber warfare. We're witnessing the first systematic attempt to collapse modern technological civilization globally. Radio Free America broadcasts on rotating frequencies, claiming federal government maintains control from hardened military installations. They promise reconstruction aid and liberation operations. After 30 days without evidence of either, most settlements stop believing. We plan for permanent independence now. Personal reflection. I think about Elvira every day. Her decision to infiltrate the occupation forces gave us the intelligence that saved hundreds of lives, but we never learned what happened to her. The hospital explosion could have been covering an escape attempt or eliminating witnesses. I choose to believe she made it out, that she's treating patients somewhere in another settlement. Orion's engineering notebooks became our most valuable resource. His sketches for jury-rigged electrical systems, water filtration designs, and communication equipment saved countless hours of dangerous trial-and-error work. He died trying to restore power to save lives, and his knowledge continues saving lives 30 days later. My emergency management training prepared me for disasters that lasted days or weeks, not for the permanent end of the system I was trained to protect. Everything I learned about crisis coordination and resource allocation applies, but the context changed completely. I'm not managing disaster recovery anymore. I'm helping establish a new form of civilization. The hardest part isn't the physical hardship. People adapt faster than you'd expect to hand-pumped water and kerosene lamps. The hardest part is accepting that the old world isn't coming back. Every sunset without electric lights, every meal cooked over wood fires, every letter written by hand instead of typed on screens. They're not temporary inconveniences anymore. They're permanent features of the new reality. Future planning. Winter preparations intensify daily. We need adequate food storage, heating fuel, and shelter weatherization before the first freeze. The agricultural station's buildings provide good shelter, but we're housing nearly 3 times the designed capacity. Construction crews work on additional shelters using salvaged materials from abandoned structures. The Education Committee proposed establishing a technical college program for spring. Advanced courses in practical engineering, medical training, agricultural science, and other essential knowledge. We have experts in residence who could teach, and young people eager to learn skills that will define their adult lives. Trade relationships developing with distant settlements. The community at Riverside Dam offers hydroelectric equipment salvage in exchange for our surplus grain. Settlement at Morrison Quarry has building materials and explosives expertise we need for winter shelter construction. The new economy runs on necessity and mutual aid rather than profit maximization. Population growth policy under debate. We have several pregnant women, and babies represent both hope for the future and strain on limited resources. Dr. Chen advocates for comprehensive prenatal care using traditional midwifery techniques. The council approved expanded food rations for pregnant mothers and nursing women despite resource constraints. Technical innovation. Marcus's wind turbine project showing remarkable progress. He's using salvaged car alternators and scrap metal to build small-scale power generation that should provide enough electricity for essential systems through winter. The design uses 19th century principles with 21st century salvaged components, perfect metaphor for our new world. Water management systems improved significantly. Civil engineer Janet Walsh designed gravity-fed distribution using salvaged PVC pipe and elevated storage tanks. We maintain water pressure without electric pumps by positioning tanks strategically and using simple physics. Technology doesn't have to be electronic to be sophisticated. Medication production experiments begun by Dr. Chun and chemistry teacher Robert Kim. They're attempting to synthesize basic antibiotics using pre-industrial methods and readily available materials. Success rate low so far, but even partial effectiveness could save lives when commercial pharmaceuticals run out completely. Communication equipment repairs reached new levels of creativity. Tim built a crystal radio receiver using salvaged components and techniques from electronics hobbyist magazines. It requires no power source and can pick up distant broadcasts. Old knowledge becomes new innovation when circumstances demand it. Final assessment. Day 30 marks the end of emergency response and the beginning of permanent adaptation. We're not disaster survivors anymore. We're pioneers establishing a new form of human settlement. The emergency never ended. It transformed into our daily reality. Success metrics changed completely. We don't measure success by restoring previous systems, but by building sustainable new ones. Population stability, food security, medical care, education, and defense. the same needs human communities have had for millennia, just approached with whatever tools and knowledge survived the collapse. The children adapt fastest. They're already learning to read by oil lamp, to calculate without computers, to play games that don't require screens. For them, this isn't a fallen world, but simply the world they're growing up in. They'll build the future from whatever foundation we establish now. My role evolved from emergency coordinator to community planner. Instead of managing crisis response, I'm helping design systems for long-term survival and growth. The skills transfer imperfectly. Resource allocation remains resource allocation, whether you're distributing disaster relief or rationing winter supplies. The network gives me hope. 60,000 people maintaining communication and cooperation across hundreds of miles of territory. We're not just surviving independently, but building connections that might eventually become the foundation for larger-scale organization. Civilization might rebuild differently, but human cooperation continues. Weather report shows early frost warnings for next week. Winter will test everything we've built. Food stores, heating fuel, shelter integrity, medical supplies, community cohesion. All will face stress greater than anything we've experienced since the initial collapse. But we'll adapt. We always have. The EMP took our machines but not our knowledge, our infrastructure but not our skills, our convenience but not our humanity. We're still here, still thinking, still working together to solve problems and build better solutions. Emergency communications log closes with this entry. Tomorrow I begin the settlement operations log, because this isn't emergency management anymore. This is life. Population, 247 souls and counting. Status, stable and building toward the future. Settlement Coordinator Cale Mercer. Millfield Agricultural Station. Day 30 after.